Hello, folks. This is Deborah Olszta, and I have with me Doris Hohensee, and we have a guest, Jim Rubens, today on Education Matters. We want to welcome Jim, candidate for U.S. Senate, hoping to unseat Jean Shaheen because of her positions on education that she's at right now. If Jim could tell us a little bit about himself and why you want to run for Senate and unseat Jean Shaheen and talk in terms of education.
Tiny bit about. Well, I was chair of the Education Committee when I was in the state Senate, and I succeeded in writing and passing the charter school law. I wrote a couple of voucher laws that did pass two bodies. I got a bill passed both bodies to end teacher tenure so that school boards had control over teacher quality. Then Governor Shaheen vetoed that bill. I got a bill passed to test teachers at the 8th grade level of competency for math and English language arts, and Governor Shaheen again had to veto that bill. So I've been very concerned about education quality since a long time ago. I have a 17-year-old son. I've started and run 10 businesses, lived in the state about 40 years, been involved in public affairs in the state for about 20 years. And our country is in very, very serious condition right now. We're drowning in debt. We're handing trillions of dollars of debt to our kids and grandkids on the nation's credit card. They can't possibly pay it. We're dooming our economy to a currency collapse or some other problem. We can't predict what. And despite the $7 trillion of printed money under the Shaheen-Obama approach to fixing the economy is not fixed. We have young people coming out of college, 2 out of 3 coming out of college can't get a full-time job. Real unemployment rate is 13 or 14% among Americans. The economy is not working. And the third thing, which ties into this issue here today, is the overreach of government has become very, very apparent to people in the state. They're spying on our emails. They are telling us what doctor and hospital we can use. And the regular citizen in the state of New Hampshire is seeing this government overreach, and it's too much. And this ties directly into the Common Core and the subject that you brought me here to talk about. It's the same approach of this one-size-fits-all, big, we can live your life better than you can government, which is not working. And it's exceedingly unpopular, and it's among the main reasons that I seek to unseat and replace the incumbent Jean Shaheen and fix our economy, get our spending under control, our debt under control, and pull back this overreach of government and let local people, in our case, let local school boards, let the state and parents work on education policy. Get the federal government out. It's not working.
Doris, do you have any questions for Jim Rubens?
Well, I'm very glad that he's looking at parents as the solutions and teachers. We need to protect our teachers from these smarter balance assessments that are still in the research stage. They're subjectively scored. They've got dispositional questions in that our legislature said we shouldn't have. So I mean, there's a real problem with these assessments, but in terms of charter schools, my only concern with those is we need to get them grounded with an elected school board, because right now everything's going centralized. We have a top-down standards, top-down tests, and next thing you know, charter schools are going to be the dumping ground for quote-unquote failed schools. So I want to make sure that these charter schools are grounded, that they're not education without representation, that they're not morphed into something that we lose control of those too.
Well, charter schools are a defender, obviously, because I wrote the law we have in the state, and we have, 24 some odd charter schools in the state. I just use one example. It's an example of a charter school that I visited earlier this week, last week. The ASD charter school in your town of Nashua. It has 450 students. They're running, they're break even now after 7 years of very hard work. They are running at $5,400 per student per year. The typical public school in our state is running in the vicinity of $15,000 to $17,000 per student per year. Now, if you're running on a third the amount of money, what are the parents and what are the students giving up? This ASD school in Nashua. It's an advanced STEM school for math, science, and engineering. They have by far the highest test scores in the state. Every student coming out of this school, it takes calculus at the end of their 12th grade. They begin Algebra 1 in 7th grade. They're producing stunning results. They accept and educate special needs students. They are oversubscribed by about 2 to 1, and they're governed by a board of directors, a parents' board of directors. So there is governance, and they're held strictly accountable. See, it's a different accountability model, the charter schools. They are accountable to the parents, and if the parents don't think the school is doing a great job for their kids, the parents take their son or daughter out of that school. Okay. So they're held accountable instead of by a political process, which is our local school board and our state board of education and unfortunately the U.S. Department of Education. The accountability is directly to the parents.
But are these boards appointed? Or are they elected by the student body or the parents of the student body?
It's a founding board, more or less like when you start a company.
Right.
A group of people get together, and again, the accountability in the case of a private company is the customers. If the customers don't think the company is doing a good job, they take their business elsewhere. Right. It's the same model for a charter school.
And that's the beauty, that they can walk.
The parents have choice. This is the important thing. It's a model of choice in the public school system.
Well, we used to have that in all public schools because we used to have 2,600 schools, average of 30 kids a school, and we used to be able to change our district and create new districts without a big fuss.
We have centralized a great deal of the past 100,
so
150
this
years.
is a step in the right direction. I'm concerned because with Newark, they're turning all their schools, their failing schools, into charters, and now they're talking about firing 300 teachers and hiring some young students that are just graduated that would be more inexpensive, more like facilitators.
Well, every state has a different model for its charter schools, and remember, the states are the laboratories of democracy, and we have seen what happens when the federal government sticks its hand in and says, we know best. We're going to make every state do it exactly the same way. These laboratories of democracy, our charter school law is being compared to laws all over the country, and we learn from one another that way. And the founders and the framer of our Constitution left. We are a federalist system of government, and they purposefully left it this way so we don't have overweening, over-controlling, centralized control over our lives.
And that leads us to the issue of no child left behind.
Our waiver runs out in 2015, in June. And if you got elected, you would be in there at that time. So you would be working from Washington to help us get around that obstacle, hopefully.
And what are your feelings on No Child Left Behind and the Race to the Top and all of these?
Well, my first experience, again, when I got elected to the state senate, we were looking at Goals 2000. And it seems like every 5 to 10 years there's a new federal one-size-fits-all, we're going to fix education, and it's going to be the final and perfect fix. So we had Goals 2000, that was rejected. And then we had standards-based education, we're apparently rejecting that now. And now we're looking at Common Core, smarter balanced tests.
Competency-based education has come back.
So the language, as you point out in our discussion before we went on, the language sounds very appealing. But what we're seeing, and maybe it's a good time to put up that test question to show.
John, do you have that question?
To show what Common Core, smarter, balanced tests look like. Now, this is, you folks can, maybe you could center it on the screen very slightly there, or maybe it's just a little screen I'm looking at.
Is a related subtraction
sentence.
Which
is a related subtraction sentence. So this is a question. This is an untested, unvalidated question foisted on first graders.
First graders.
First graders are asked it. Now, if you're don't think of yourself an adult. Think of yourself as a first grader. Which is a related subtraction sentence? And I see 4 dark, and I see three light dots there, and I don't see any subtraction in the question. No. So for a first grader, this is an extremely difficult question. So this is the problem with this. What the Obama administration did, and I describe this as corporate cronyism, which is a problem in many places in our federal government, where the federal government picks a particular company, in this case Pearson, to develop the Common Core standards and the tests, and they foist this upon the states. And you folks can describe how that happened.
Through the waivers of No Child Left Behind.
And these tests are not validated, and they're not appropriate for first graders. And if you look and see what's happening in other states where they have rolled this thing out a year or two in advance of New Hampshire, it's causing massive rebellions by principals and teachers. You can talk about New York State.
Anxiety of the students,
I have an extremely close friend, a very liberal Democrat who teaches in Rhode Island, who's had this whole program for 3 years. It's reducing students to tears. Teachers are rebelling. It doesn't work. And it's the Obama administration, getting together with a few cronies and sticking this thing out into the
And
public.
they're really destroying our children. They're calling it
Right.
Common Core Syndrome.
Oh, really?
When the children...
That's what the psychologists are.
Psychologists
There's
are...
a syndrome.
Common Core Syndrome. When
Yeah.
your child, folks, comes home and is distressed, distraught, they've been to school for 6 hours
Yeah.
and say, what happened to you at school? You were fine when you
Yeah.
left, and now you're
Right.
a mess when you get home.
Yeah.
It's called Common Core Syndrome.
Yep.
And, if you take your child to the doctors and they say, the child has stomach aches, they have headaches, or they're
Yeah.
just their behavior's changing,
Right.
what they're going to do? They're going to want to medicate your child.
Well, the solution is to opt out. We're
Well,
looking for
Yeah,
6% to opt out.
We need to opt out, folks, of the Smarter Balance
And
testing
parents,
in New Hampshire.
Parents
Yeah.
have that right.
So the point that, for people who aren't used to this stuff is not ready for prime time.
It's research.
it-
It's not
it's
been
in- it's-
validated. It
right,
won't be in
right.
2015.
Right.
And they're not giving parents informed consent. They're not
Yeah.
telling all the parents that, do we have your permission? No, they're saying you're required to have your child do this.
Right.
This is a mandate to the districts. It can't be
Yeah.
a mandate if it's research. So it's backwards. So we're telling parents that these are your children. You still own them. Not own them, but you have the right to decide whether these are objectionable assessment materials or whether they're adequate.
And parents can opt out now,
Yes.
as they're doing in
Well,
other places
they're
around the
being
country.
threatened.
You're having
Jim.
massive opt-outs. You
Yes,
folks-
there's opting
yeah.
out going on, but they're being threatened. The parents are being told that they're educationally neglecting their children and that they could be brought to DCYF, or DCYF could do an investigation. So these young parents, they're not as experienced as
Right,
Doris and I
right,
are,
right,
okay? We're
right,
not
right.
intimidated by such
Yeah.
things.
They
Right.
need to bond together and know that they're doing it as a group. And they know that they're doing
Yeah.
it to protect their teachers.
Yeah.
Because the teachers are going to be punitively attacked
Evaluated.
by these performance numbers. Maybe not the first year or
And the
two.
special needs, my
It's
goodness, the
not.
special needs.
And the English language
Protect
learners.
your special needs students, folks.
Yeah. So in order to, enhance the credibility of your case, you folks who are, parents fighting this, I cite the 500 New York State school principals who have signed a letter. Tell us
Yes.
about this.
Well,
This
that's
is
in
not
New-
just
that's
this is
New
not
York
just some
State.
parents rebelling. This is school
Administration.
school
Principal
leaders.
administrators. But
Yeah.
we're starting to see that in Nashua. We haven't had the
Yeah.
test yet. We've only
Yeah.
had piloting.
Okay.
And this year we'll have field testing. But we had a middle school principal in Nashua who
Yeah.
came out against it and said these are age inappropriate.
Yeah.
And he described the distress that the teachers felt looking
Mm-hmm.
at it and saying that it was more sociological or psychological than academic,
Mm-hmm.
and that it would be totally inappropriate for special ed children,
Mm.
and that some of them didn't want to administer the tests.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then was followed up by the Nashua Teachers Union
Mm-hmm.
that came out in defense of the children and the teachers and saying that we need an alternative assessment, that this is not appropriate for our children.
Mm-hmm.
And they sent that letter to the Department of Education in New Hampshire.
Yep.
So we're seeing pushback on a certain level, but you have to remember that the teachers, they are not allowed to publicly criticize school policy.
Yep.
That's part of their contract.
Yeah. Well, that's why it's
So-
good that the principals in New York State have risen up.
Right.
Yeah,
It's a major breakthrough.
And are providing a voice for and showing that this is not just
They're leading the way.
aggravated parents leading the way. Right.
Can we talk
Yeah.
about the millions
Yeah.
of dollars that are being threatened to being withheld from the state if we in fact change course here,
We have
Doris?
legislation, House Bill 1508, and it just says that we want to terminate Common Core and Smarter Balance Aligned tests from the state level. If you want to do it in your district, fine, but get the state out of it, because the state's been doing this since 2010. They had 2 hearings, but nobody in the public came to them. So then they've been using backdoor methods. Our school boards didn't vote them in, but they meet with our principals and our superintendents monthly, and they have been putting this in through the back door.
Well, you folks should describe how the state of New Hampshire got into this. So what was the process that led the state?
Well, we had 2 meetings in July and June of 2010. They got this final draft on the 2nd of June. They had a hearing on the 9th. Nobody in the public was there.
Would explain
For
the
the Common
waivers,
Core.
the No Child
And the
Left Behind
waiver. How do we
waiver,
get the
and
waiver?
Oh,
money
they
being
were
dangled.
trying to apply for
yeah.
Race to the Top grants in August. So they
Of
had
2010.
of August of 2010, which they didn't win.
Yeah.
But in order to qualify, better qualify, they had to adopt these standards. So they had 2 rushed hearings that none of the public read. Even some of the board members weren't fully conversant with the standards. They had 5 or 6 teachers there talking about them. They were supposed to compare Common Core to the GLEs, the grade level expectations. They hadn't completed the task. They admit that, and they passed these anyway. So if this was a rush job and the districts aren't all on board and the unions are saying the aligned assessments aren't good for our children, maybe it's time to get the state out of it and let the districts look at this anew.
But we're told that they won't get all the money if
But
it's
we've
all
already
about the
gotten
money.
the waiver.
And Jim, this is all coming from the feds. This is strangling our state. This is strangling our parents. How do we get out of this?
It's $119 million that they say is in jeopardy. But my understanding is they've made the agreement with the feds and the money will be coming in. Now, if we have another agreement in 2015, hopefully Jim or somebody else that's very positive for parents and local control will make sure that we get a better deal than we got with this waiver, which was total capitulation on longitudinal databases that tracks all our student information. There's privacy loopholes. There's no privacy consent from parents. They're selling our private information to vendors.
Yeah, but just summing up how the state got into this, No Child Left Behind, the benchmarks were getting higher and higher. More of our local school districts were failing to meet the progressively higher. So states all over the country, including New Hampshire, were looking for a way out of having takeovers of local schools.
3 years later, in 2013.
Right. So the state is incentivized to get a waiver from No Child Left Behind. You get some money, you adopt Common Core. Am I describing this about correctly?
Well, they adopted in 2010. In 2013, they reaffirmed their love at the board and the department for Common Core in order to get a waiver.
Right. So you get the waiver in return for adopting
for more
Common Core.
things, yes.
Plus you get some money.
Plus you get the money.
Right.
Right.
So you have states are really pulled into accepting and adopting Common Core without...
Times were tough back then.
Times were
They're
tough.
selling our children's future
And the
with
pressure
this.
under No Child Left Behind was becoming increasingly difficult for school districts in the state of
Well,
New
now
Hampshire.
they're downplaying it. I heard Heather Gage saying that it was a terrible lie we foisted on people, that these No Child Left Behind kneecap tests were valid at all. This is after the fact.
It was a failed program from the
They're
start.
going to say that about this one after the fact, but let's
Right.
not get in it.
So the state was lured in with the money and
Always the
escaping
money.
from another program, and again, Common Core not being properly evaluated, not ready for prime time is a simple
No
way
Child
that I
Left
say.
Behind should be repealed. Do you think No Child Left Behind should be repealed
It
for the
should.
sake of the state's autonomy?
Again, if you look around the world, look at how America has run public education. We've attempted to have reform coming down from the federal level, and it is just wave after wave of these faddish programs have not worked to improve public education in our country, which must be improved. It's a very serious economic and cultural problem in our country. You look at other countries. I like to use the example of Finland, which is sort of in the top 5 to top 10 in the world. And they have a completely different model of education than we do. It's not top-down. Teachers are given extreme autonomy in the classroom, and the teachers are selected from the highest echelons. Their teachers are trained very well, they're paid well, and the federal government in Finland does not control the curriculum. Teachers have the autonomy, and they achieve relatively high, quite high results. So the model that I think we ought to adopt in America, and the one that I think parents and teachers prefer, is teachers given autonomy in the classroom, trained and paid sufficiently to do the work that we want them to do, parents having control over which school their kids go to, and get the federal government out of the process of imposing faddish, one-size-fits-all education doctrines and curriculums and tests on every state in the country. And you'll find that in a country as big as ours, we have 50 states. We're a federalist country where the states may adopt different approaches, and local school districts may adopt different approaches to education. And let us experiment and find the ones that work, and states and localities will imitate the ones that work better.
Now, why
and
didn't
again,
we imitate Massachusetts
Well, that's what we do as
standards?
homeschoolers.
There's an example. No, Massachusetts was the top testing state.
Yes, they were the top.
They're up there with Singapore in terms of their state. So we wonder, why can't America do as well as some of these Asian countries? Singapore basically at the top, or second to the top right now, and Massachusetts students testing right up there globally. So
Massachusetts is reconsidering their standards. They're pulling back from Common Core and thinking and having a pause.
So I was at that event that you folks were at back, it must have been 3 or 4 months ago, when one of the leaders of the Massachusetts Standards and Test was literally offering the Massachusetts tests and standards to our state at no cost.
Right.
So we have this laboratory of democracy in Massachusetts working, producing world-class, top-of-the-world education results for all the students in Massachusetts, offering that program to the state of New Hampshire for free. And the state of New Hampshire could voluntarily accept it or not.
Manchester's going to look at those.
What?
They're looking.
Manchester's
looking.
Is looking at it?
They're
Looking at it,
developing their own academic standards.
So this is the great thing about allowing these laboratories of democracy to function in the United States of America, and not having the federal government choose this substandard, poorly provided.
Common Core doesn't prepare you for STEM. It doesn't go that high. It goes up to algebra and a little bit of trig, and it doesn't do pre-calculus and calculus.
We heard at that event that it tops out 2 grade levels below what is necessary for preparedness to college. Common Core. This is the Common Core that President Obama and Jeanne Shaheen are trying to thrust on our state. It's not preparing our students.
But they use terms like college and career ready, these presumptive terms that make you think that, well, we've already done that.
But the problem is the actual Common Core standard, as I mentioned, is 2 grade levels below college readiness. So you have your student coming out of high school, if we were to adopt this in New Hampshire, having to have 2 years of remedial instruction once they go into college.
Or to go to a 2-year school that doesn't do STEM.
Career.
Yeah. Right. It's not a good situation.
Right.
Now, Jim, can I just jump in here about the business interference?
Right.
We're seeing this
Oh, my goodness.
public-private partnerships going on with the Chamber of Commerce and business and taking over our K through 12 education. It's not, I mean, we're talking about elementary school and preparing them for college and career. Let them be children for a little bit of their life and learn things as they go. But the business has now jumped in and
They're
said
saying that they're stakeholders.
they're the stakeholders.
They're paid by Gates, a certain amount of money federal at the national level, the chambers, to support Common Core, and they all are. I mean, so now we have a...
How are we going to deal with the business and the Chamber of Commerce and their initiatives?
Well, all of these matters are under legislative control. Your local school board, we should restore authority to the local school board at the state level through legislation that is navigating through our state legislature. Restore control to the local school board as to which standards they wish to adopt. If the state wishes to propose something, many school boards may adopt or not adopt.
Yeah,
Again,
the standards are voluntary.
Rather than defer, the school boards need to
let it be
just take...
voluntary.
Right.
Restore authority to our local school boards, and certainly restore authority to our state Board of Education, our State Department of Education, so that they are not forced to adopt Common Core and the Smarter Balanced, the associated Smarter Balanced test. It's going to take time to navigate from where we are now to that.
When you send federal money down, they should send it, like we have a law, RSA 15, where you prevent state money from lobbying. So now you have federal money coming to the Department of Education, and all they do is lobby. They work the back door by pulling in all these different reforms directly with the districts. There ought to be a little bit of restraint at the federal level to say this money goes to the children, not to the not to all these administrators.
Yeah. Well, in general, this is part of the kind of republicanism that I support. This is why I'm a Republican. And to the extent we do have money coming from the federal government, it should be much more increasingly block granted to the state or to the local school districts to effectuate their reform and improvement plans. We have, for example, the disabilities law, and the federal government promised to fund 40% of that, and we're up in the 20% range of that funding.
17, I heard.
So. Yeah, a little below 20, right. So let's instead of all these strings, simply block grant that federal money back to the states and the school districts to simply fund the special education law we have right now, and let the local school boards and the charter schools utilize that money in a more efficient way. So the extent to which you interpose bureaucratic entanglements at the federal level and then at the state board of education level, you basically, these sticky fingers remove some of the money which would be better served getting right to the classroom, right to the teacher, right to the student. We have, this is typical in the United States, we have an extremely complicated social safety net. We have 127 some odd programs to help disadvantaged kids run in 4 cabinet-level organizations. Most of these programs have never been tested for effectiveness. They conflict with one another, and you have all these sticky bureaucratic fingers taking money out of this money that would be better getting directly to the needy recipient, whatever the program is.
It's always been the problem with the federal.
And we have a very inefficient safety net in America, and education is just an example of this.
Thing.
So block grant the money, send it back to folks. If there's going to be federal money, send it back to folks to effectuate what we really, really want, which is support for special needs students or support for teachers in the classroom. That's where the money is really needed.
Teachers, because we're losing our best teachers. We're seeing them retire early. They're leaving
because of the lack of autonomy. It's too much top-down control. And you respect your employees, who are our teachers. You respect them by paying them reasonably well and giving them autonomy. To do the work in the classroom.
And that's why homeschoolers, without a lot of credentials, without a lot of money, they have the autonomy and the motivation, and they succeed. And I believe our teachers will too, if we give them the same tools, the autonomy and the respect that they deserve.
Well, with the 2 minutes we have remaining,
2 minutes.
Jim, if you'd like to just give us some information about the primary that's coming up.
Well,
and
Jim Rubens for U.S. Senate, jimrubens.com, spelled like the painter, not the sandwich. Lots of policy initiatives are there, and I'm working to unite the Republican Party around the 3 issues I talked around. We have to deal with our debt. Our country's bankrupt. We've got to get serious about it. We can't keep putting this on the nation's credit card and handing it to our kids and grandkids. The economy is not working. Just printing money, the Obama-Shaheen approach of printing money and sticking the tab on our kids and grandkids, it's not fixing the economy. And government's overreach that we talked about and we're illustrating with Common Core, trying to manage everyone's daily lives, telling us what doctor we can use, telling us what medications we can have, spying on our emails. It's too much centralized government in our lives. We need to roll this back and respect federalism, respect the autonomy of citizens, bring government back to within the Constitution. And I'm uniting the Republican Party around this. I'd like to replace Jeanne Shaheen with solutions in Congress, in the United States Senate, to these problems. She has voted 99% of the time with President Obama. You can see the results in Obamacare. It is not working in our state. We need solutions to health care. We need solutions to education. So solutions consistent with local control, consistent with a limited, lean federal government, consistent with balanced budgets, and a growing economy.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What date is the primary?
It's in September, early September, and jimrubens.com.
We do appreciate you coming in and speaking with us at Education Matters, and we hope the best in your campaign, and we thank you for appearing with us here. Take care.
Thank you.